All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to TeleShadowing. We are live on YouTube. Please feel free to ask questions in the chat box as we go along and they'll be addressed. I'm honored to introduce our mentor for today, Dr. Asma Chima. Dr. Chima serves as the Clinical Assistant Professor of Medicine and teaches residents and medical school students. She's an internal medicine board-certified physician who completed her residency at the University of South Florida. She's a mentor to many students and a published author in several scientific journals as well. Excuse me. Dr. Chima participates in community services and believes in health for all, while also running a clinic for low-resource patients. And now it is my honor to request Dr. Chima to begin today's session on medical ethics. Thank you.
Very good morning, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be with you today, this morning, this weekend morning. And thank you, Amna, for introducing. And as Amna mentioned, we talk about medical ethics in medicine today. So we gather to explore the crucial topic, it's a very crucial topic of medical ethics. Before delving deeper, let's start by understanding what medical ethics entails. So medical ethics refers to a branch of ethics that deals with moral principles, values in the context of healthcare and medical practice. It provides a framework to guide healthcare professionals in making morally sound decisions that prioritize the well-being and best interest of our patients. So it's very important to understand and know the ethics in medicine. And there are board exams, we have ethics questions come, we have USMLE exams, there are section of ethics questions comes in there to assess our ethical values. As medical professionals, we have the privilege and the responsibility to care for the health and well-being of individuals, and specifically our patients come to us to get medical advice. However, medicine is not just a scientific endeavor, it carries a profound moral dimension. So we encounter situations where decisions impact patients' lives, their autonomy, and their dignity. So it is this moral dimension that necessitates the incorporation of ethics in our practice. And the practice of medical ethics directly impacts the patient care and the trust patients place in us. Because as we know, medicine is a trustworthy profession. And when we incorporate ethical principles into our decision-making, it fosters a sense of trust, respect, and transparency in patient-physician relationship. That is very important. So as I mentioned in my prior sessions as well, patient-physician relationship is very important, and trust building, respect, and transparency. This trust is vital for effective communication. It helps us share the decision-making. It helps us to share all the medical information, put all the cards on the table so patients have a better understanding and ultimately improve the health outcomes. So let's move on and see what are the 4 pillars of medical ethics. So medical ethics is guided by several fundamental principles that help us navigate the complex landscape of decision-making. Let's briefly explore these principles. First, I will talk about the pillar of autonomy. So autonomy recognizes the importance of respecting patients' rights to make informed decisions about their own healthcare. It involves what we're supposed to do. So we have to provide detailed information, obtaining informed consent from the patient, and respecting patient choices, because we will come across with the patient from different backgrounds, different cultural backgrounds, different ethnicities, different education backgrounds. So we have to understand patient's perspective as well. Next, I will talk about the pillar of beneficence. So beneficence emphasizes the duty to act in the best interest of the patient. Why we need it? To promote their well-being and strive to improve their health outcomes. It embodies the principle of do good and guide us to act for the benefit of the patient. So we work as a team, right? So we have to give all the information to the patient, obtain the consent, and understand the patient's perspective as well. So next, there's a pillar of non-maleficence. So it's closely related to the Hippocratic Oath principle of do no harm. What does it mean? It reminds us of the need to avoid causing harm or any unnecessary suffering to the patients. So it highlights the importance of balancing the risk and benefits and minimizing the potential harm. Like any medicine we start, we have to explain to the patient, we have to educate the patient why we're starting it, and then we talk about risks and benefits. So all medications, all the procedures, they have risk and benefits, and we have to explain in detail to the patient, and so patient have a better idea what's going on, so they can have a better idea about it, so they can work together and know their perspectives to address it for better health outcome. So next pillar is the pillar of justice. So pillar of justice means the equitable treatment of all the patients. It emphasizes the fair distribution of healthcare resources and the treatment of all patients equally. It entails ensuring that access to medical care is based on need rather than factors such as socioeconomic status, race, gender, and goes one step beyond equity. So these are the main pillars of medical ethics that I want to bring this up, talk about briefly. So medical ethics provides, as mentioned, valuable framework for decision-making in healthcare. And by considering the principles of all these 4 pillars of autonomy, beneficence, non-maleficence, and justice, we can analyze the complex situations and make decisions. Why we need to do this? To prioritize the well-being of our patients. So ethical decision-making allows us to navigate the complexity of medical practice while upholding the moral obligations in our profession. So let's explore a couple of examples of ethical dilemmas that medical professionals might encounter. And these dilemmas could include respecting the patient autonomy, when their decisions conflict with our medical recommendations, when making decisions about the resource allocation in situations of scarcity, or dealing with any conflicts of interest that may compromise the best interest of our patients. It is through the understanding of these dilemmas that we can develop the strategies to address them ethically. So as we all know, patient comes first. So they should be involved, and their perspective, we should respect their perspective as well, but besides, we have to give our professional opinion as well. All right, so let's move on the ethical dilemma cases. I wanna start first case over here, and I would like some student who can read this for us, for all of us. Can anyone volunteer? I would like the participation. As I always say, I would like the participation from the students. Anyone want to do it? Anyone can raise a hand or unmute yourself, introduce yourself, and you can read it for us. Let's see. Okay, okay, I will ask Amna. Can you read it for us?
A 23-year-old woman, a pregravid woman at 39 weeks gestation, identifies herself as a Jehovah's Witness at admission to the labor and delivery floor and declares her refusal of any blood therapy. Shortly after delivering a healthy 7-pound son, she develops severe postpartum hemorrhage. Hypotension develops and she becomes unconscious. Her hematocrit drops to 18 milligrams per deciliter, and immediate transfusions and surgery are judged to be life-saving. Her husband supports her refusal, but her mother insistently demands that you have to save my daughter. The most appropriate next step is to A, have the mother sign the consent for treatment for incapacitated daughter, B, seek a court order overruling her refusal, transfuse your patient without informing her husband, D, withhold blood therapy and surgery even though her death is virtually inevitable, and E, withdraw from the case because it violates your own moral ethical values to let a salvageable patient die.
All right, thank you, Minahil. So now I would like the participation again, and can you please type, what do you think? What's the best option? Let's see if we get some responses. So again, as I mentioned, just participate. I know we are here to learn. Just think, what do you think is the best option? What you will choose, A, B, C, D, E options. Okay, once we got E, one said D, Mahima said D, okay, because respect the patient's consent, okay, good. Kamran said, Kaman said E, Shivan said E, good, very good. I really appreciate your participation. Very good. So let's go one by one. First of all, what's the right answer? So Yes, answer is D. Withhold blood therapy and surgery, even though her death is virtually inevitable. So regrettably, answer is D. So why? So withhold blood therapy and surgery only after good faith efforts to test her choice. This is patient request. As we obtain the consent and we promise of confidentiality, and patient requested. So finally, the best we offer our patient is not life, but we support for their life. So and they tell us what that requires. So finally, and legally, the husband takes the precedence. But more importantly, the A is wrong because mother cannot make decisions on her behalf. And we already obtained the concept of the patient, and we have to respect the wishes that one of our students mentioned. I really appreciate the answer. And B, why is B is incorrect? Seeking a court order is incorrect because an unenlightened judgment, a judge might say yes. And there is no more justified that medical paternalism, which is not ethical nor lawful. And why C is incorrect? Because transferring her to, as it says in the choice C, is not a right answer. Even if you get away with it, it's not appropriate. It does not indicate qualities of integrity and character as a physician is upheld to. And regarding choice E, as most of I saw the answers, the withdrawing from the case as it says in choice E is not appropriate. Since doctors are people and have rights, is it appropriate step? But since doctors are people and have rights, including the right to defend their own deeply held moral and religious convictions, there are limits to how self-sacrifice is owed. But sacrificing the patient's autonomy to protect your own is not as ethically appropriate as serving the patient at the expense of yourself. That's the reason it's incorrect. And in the ethical pantheon, altruism ranks higher than your own morals values. So in an emergency, in such a situation, doctors' rights must yield to the patients. All right, very good. So let's move on to our second dilemma, the second one. So I would like, again, participation from the students. Anyone would like to volunteer to read these questions for all of us? You can unmute yourself and
I can have a go.
sure.
All right. So we have here, after extensive testing, the diagnosis of leukemia is confirmed in a 7-year-old girl. Your opinion is that the girl will live no more than 2 more years. When informed of this diagnosis and prognosis, the girl's parents requested their daughter not be told of the diagnosis, so that her last days can be very happy ones. Faced with the request, the most appropriate management is to either A, ask the ward nurse to talk with the girl about leukemia without telling her own diagnosis, B, discussing it with her parents for their reasons not wishing to inform the girl of her diagnosis, C, informing the girl of her diagnosis but do not tell the parents they have done so, D, inform the parents that you are required to tell the girl her diagnosis, E is to provide the parents with published articles about informing children of bad news and asking them to have a discussion with you after they have read them. F, respect the parents' wishes and not tell the girl. G is to schedule the parents for grief counseling and speak with them again after they have attended several sessions. Or H, seeking permission from the court to inform the girl.
Thank you, Kenan. I really appreciate.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you. So now I would like participation again. So please write in the chat box, what do you think is the right answer? So let's see, we are getting responses B, we get answer F, okay, good. Keep on going. Let's see, Shivan said B, okay, Vinahal said B, Shivan, Anita, Canon said B, okay, good. Okay, very good. All right, so let's go one by one. Let's see the correct answer first. So answer in this scenario is B. Very good. So discuss the parents, their reasons, why they explore more about the wishes of not informing the girl of her diagnosis. If the parents refuse, get some more information. What are the reasons behind it? Maybe there's some reason that we can address. There may be a simple issue there that the physician can address it. So remember that the child needs to know about her condition. As patient knows, in this scenario, patient knows that something is going wrong, right? Not telling her simply increases her fear and her apprehension, and not wanting to tell the child is less for her own good and more of the products of the parents' defense mechanism of denial. Because kids are very important to the parents, right? So there's where they get emotional, and there's a stages, we'll talk about some point, defense mechanism is called denial. So that might be the reason parent doesn't want to tell to their child. So that's why we need to explore further before jumping on the conclusions. And the next option, A, why it's incorrect. Asking the staff or nurse is not a right option. There are two reasons. First of all, the issue is not the child's general education, but giving the child information about her condition is the situation here. And she has a right to know, and research suggests that girl will have a less distress if she is talked to directly and honestly about her condition. And secondly, the physician should do the communication and not pass it off to the staff or the nurse or grief counselor to talk about it. So there's a reason we rule out the G as well in this scenario. And then the C option, the parents are the legal guardians, yes, and responsible for making healthcare decisions for the child. So we must work with them and not against them by circumventing them, as it says in choice C. So child will be best served when she gets a consistent message from both the physician and the parents. And then D, the parents are not required to tell her, nor are you. And that rules out the choice D. It is simply best for the child and the parents to deal with the reality. And of course, we have to address the parents' denial as a defense mechanism, and we have to address those issues as well first. And if the parents refuse, be patient about it, give it time, and eventually the child must be told about it. And the choice E, the physician should tell the parents the information they need to know and tell them to read the published literature, read more about it, learn about it, give them some time. And it says in choice E, but the physician is the one who can only talk in terms of specifics, while the articles will only give parents more general information about commentary. It is a relationship the parents have with the physician that will help them use coping mechanism and cope this situation. And finally, parents are the legal guardians for the child, and they are not refusing needed treatment or placing the child at risk. So there's no point, the court has no standing here, which rules out the choice H as well here. So I hope you got the point one by one, why we are making these choices. So these are the two situations I brought up with you. So I will go more about what are the ethical challenges faced by the medical professionals. So in our medical journey, as a medical professionals, we encounter various ethical challenges. And these challenges can range from, respecting patient confidentiality and navigating end-of-life decisions. That is very challenging as well, to balancing the situation with the use of limited resources and addressing the conflicts of interest. And it is also essential for us to be prepared to address these challenges with ethical reasoning and sensitivity. And I will add on, there are many in the hospital setup, there are ethical committees built up to address those issues as well. And incorporating these ethics in medical education and medical practice brings several significant benefits. First of all, it helps aspiring doctors develop a strong moral compass, enabling them to approach patient care with integrity and compassion. By instilling ethical principles early on, we lay the foundation for a lifetime of ethical practice. And secondly, incorporating ethics in the medical education enhances critical thinking and decision-making skills. That is very important in our medical profession. And the ethical dilemmas often require careful consideration of various factors, weighing the potential benefits and harms. And by engaging in ethical discussions and case studies, so medical students learn to analyze the complex situations ahead of time, and it will help the decision-making, critical thinking, so they can make well-reasoned judgments. So furthermore, a solid understanding of these medical ethics promotes effective communication with the patients and their families. And it also helps physicians navigate difficult conversations and also respect diverse perspectives, because patients are from different cultural background. We have to respect their perspectives as well. And most importantly, establish the trust that will help us develop the physician-patient relationship. And most importantly, patient feels comfortable. So when they feel comfortable, they will listen to you. They will understand why you are bringing up all this information to them and putting all the pieces of puzzle together, give them the right information so they can perceive better. It's for their healthcare, because their healthcare comes first. And I always tell my patients that I'm here to give you all the options, but they are the boss of their body and mind. So please tell me their perspective. What do they think? So sometimes nurse staff call me that patient is refusing this treatment. So I go and talk to the patient and explain to them, and they understand and they agree. So that's very important. Listen to the patients. Assertive communication is very important. It will help us prioritize their values and respect their autonomy as well. So another benefit I would like to share is the promotion of a positive work environment and professional collaboration. So ethical practices foster an atmosphere of mutual respect and support among healthcare professionals, enhancing their teamwork. It reduces the conflicts among us. And by aligning on ethical principles, healthcare teams can work together. Because, healthcare is a teamwork. I always tell my patients a teamwork, and patients are vital team members. So it's very important, effective communication, explain to them everything, and we have to work together to provide better patient care. So incorporating ethics in medical education, excuse me, also helps physicians to adapt to rapidly evolving healthcare landscape. And ethical considerations arise in new areas of medicine. And just last week, I was attending one of the such difficult patient scenarios, how we have to deal with it. So it's very important to understand this, and such as I will bring up more ethical considerations in the new areas of medicine, like genetic testing, and most importantly, artificial intelligence, right? Like all of you heard about ChatGPT. And then resource allocation during pandemics, and we all have experienced the recent pandemic. So by staying abreast of ethical discussions and developments and better understanding, deeper understanding, physicians can navigate these emerging challenges and provide ethically sound care to the patient. So at the end, our priority is the patient care, right? So that's the reason we all need to be aware of it, all the ethical values. And lastly, I will address the ethical approach in medicine, help safeguard the integrity and reputation of our profession as a whole. And you will see if you see the statistics, medicine profession is the most reputable profession worldwide. So that's very important. We have to keep that trust. Patients trust that healthcare providers, healthcare providers will prioritize their well-being and act in their best interest, in patient best interest. So by consistently practicing medical ethics, physicians uphold the ethical standards of the profession and contribute to its continued credibility and public trust. So I will just conclude. In conclusion, I would like to stop here, but briefly, I would say that medical ethics in medical education and practice yields numerous benefits for aspiring doctors, and for patients and healthcare teams and the profession itself. So it equipped us healthcare providers with the necessary skills. So it's a skill to learn about it, and moral framework to navigate ethical challenges, foster patient trust, and deliver the high quality patient-centered care. That's our goal, to provide the best possible high quality patient care. So now I will stop here. And we have very astute students with us. They have been accepted to the DC, Maryland, Virginia area medical schools. And it's a great honor to be with them today and to address many of the frequently asked questions about ethics exams. So as you all know, who are preparing to go to medical school, taking your MCAT exam. So when you go for apply for medical schools, there are some areas and some medical schools you need to take the ethical exam as well. So these students, I'm very excited to talk with them today. And the board interact sections, ask them the questions. They took the exams and they scored higher in the Casper exam. And why they did it? Because they want to prepare you for it about medical ethics. And it will help you with the medical application process as well. So I will stop here, and I would like to thank you, all these three students, Raneem, Noura, and Minahil. Thank you, everyone.
All right, thank you, Dr. Chima, for that informative introduction into medical ethics. Now I'm going to be introducing the Accepted Medical Students panel, and I'll be moderating the session and asking questions live as a pre-medical student applying to medical school next year. So first, I would like to introduce Raneem Megahead. Raneem graduated from the University of Maryland with a degree in neurobiology and physiology and will be attending medical school. Her fun fact is that if you have ever emailed the TeleShadowing email, she's the one who responds to them promptly and cheerfully as our Director of Communications. Also, if you ever email her a meme or a kind message, she will respond with an even kinder email back. Next, I would like to introduce Noura Fadul. Noura also graduated from the University of Maryland Honors College with a degree in neurobiology and physiology with double minors in business and nonprofit leadership and social innovation. She will be attending the George Washington School of Medicine and Health Sciences this fall. She also took both the Casper and AAMC preview tests. Fun fact, she raises birds and really loves her chickens and spending time with them. Finally, I would like to introduce Minahil Chima. Minahil is also a UMD Honors College graduate with a degree in neurophys and a minor in public policy who will be matriculating into the University of Maryland School of Medicine this fall. Minahil scored in the top quartile for the Casper test as well. She also runs a newsletter and blog called Islamic Roots on her website, so be sure to check it out. Now, without further ado, I'd like to request Minahil to start today's panel. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amna. Really appreciate you volunteering your time to moderate today. So let's get started. Now, I wanted to kind of talk about the sphere that we're talking about now. So this is a medical school application series that talked about how to prepare for the MCAT, how to actually prepare your application, your personal statement, your essays. So right now we're going to be focused on the application process in particular, because some medical schools don't require it. It really depends on the medical schools that you have on a list. And so some of them don't even require it at all. So that's something that, also keep in mind. Not every medical school actually requires you to take these ethics tests. I know that the school I'll be joining, University of Maryland School of Medicine, does not require it for their applications, but the other ones do. So just to give a little bit of an overview and a background of what these tests are, in case it's the first time you're hearing about it. Casper is known as a situational judgment test, or SJT. It stands for computer-based assessment for sampling personal characteristics. Basically, it is there to kind of help you kind of assess you and see using a computer. It's not really a person scoring you. It's really just this computer-based test. So actually, let me correct what I just said. People are scoring you, but it's computer-based, as in you can take this test from the comfort of your home. The Casper is required by 44 MD and 10 DO schools in the US. And just to give you context, there are a little over 140 medical schools in the United States. So like I said, not every medical college requires this test. This is my score when I actually took the test. I just took a screenshot from the score page. What I want you guys to notice is that I was given a quartile between 75 and 100. So really, we're given quartiles and we're being told our scores, either the first, second, third, or fourth, which is something to keep in mind, because it's very interesting. You'd expect that you get your score back, but you don't. Actually, medical schools get your exact, it's called a Z-score, in 2 weeks, whereas the student only receives a quartile in 4 weeks. So I don't actually know if I did 75% better than everyone or 100% better than everyone. It could be anywhere in between. So I actually, fun story, I tried contacting one of the medical schools I was actually accepted into to provide me my Z-score for purposes of this talk. And they told me that they cannot provide it. They wanted to, but they told me that they couldn't because they signed an agreement with Casper that they cannot release any scores to their applicants. So it is a little sad, a little extra thing that's not as transparent to us during this application process, but I'm sure that, if you're aiming for the 4th quartile, you'll be fine. And now about the AEMC preview, Noura, do you want to talk a little bit more about this one?
It's been a while, so I can't say much, but it's definitely very different from the Casper test. The Casper test has like essay-based questions and video-based questions, whereas the AEMC preview is a lot more, it's basically just multiple choice.
Yes, and we'll get more into that too. We had the structures out because we actually, all 3 of us forgot about these tests because we took them from the comfort of our homes. We took it last a little over a year ago, so we have the overview and structures here to remind us as well. So the AEMC preview is actually required by less medical schools. So Raneem and I didn't actually have to take this test. 12 schools recommended. I know that the college that Noura is going to, they recommended it. And so the saying goes that if something is highly recommended, a thing that could differentiate you from other applicants is going ahead and taking the test, because that way you know that you've checked all your boxes up and covering what the medical schools require of you or expect of you. So now I'm going to go over this question. I'll ask it for you because I have slides for this one, but the other ones don't have slides, so you can ask us those. So when applying, when is the best time to actually take these ethics tests amidst your MCAT, your other application materials? I remember we told you that it's best to apply early, which is June 1st to every year. I know that people are still applying this month. That's okay. It is today's June 17th. So it is the active cycle for the upcoming cycle for students to start next fall. So I wanted to actually share with you, to put into context Casper test dates and then also the AEMC test dates. So it is a busy slide, but bear with me here. So basically last year, just deriving from personal experience, I took the MCAT in March. I plan to take the Casper by May. So the first date that was available last year was also around May 4th. So let's say I'm taking it May 4th. And then I would have my score, scored, within two to 4 weeks. I'd have it before June 1st to be able to apply. So May 31st, I believe, is when the application opened, and June 1st is when I applied. So I know Raneem applied May 31st, the day the application opened. So she definitely beat me on that one. But you are still able to take the Casper test anytime during the summer. I know that Noura took it in August, and that's totally fine as well because she got her scores back on time. So she applied here, but it was still fine for her because the interview season and offer period began like between October to the January of the following year. Actually, you can be accepted anytime still now, for the last application cycle, which is also another thing about the process that a lot of students say that isn't necessarily fair, because now that technically there are 2 cycles going on. One is of the last year's cycle, one is of this upcoming year's cycle. So the AEMC previews actually offer a little less, but that makes sense because it's not as required by medical schools. You get your scores within a month or after a month. So these are 2 different test dates. So I took the screenshot last night. The registration is open right now for July 12th and July 13th. All right, and you'd receive your scores by July 18th directly, and it would be sent directly to medical schools because the AAMC is actually the application portal that we use to apply to med school, the MD medical schools. All right. Now, to refresh for all of us, what exactly is on the Casper test? It assesses these couple of qualities, collaboration, communication, empathy, effort, how much effort you're putting into your responses, your self-awareness of what's going on. So I'll talk a little bit more about self-awareness and how I think that might have been a successful trait for taking this test. It's not really talked about very often. Also, professionalism, your general problem solving. Again, when you think about a situational judgment test, it's an ethics test. They're assessing who you are beyond just the paper, beyond just what you're writing about yourself, but rather what would you do given these different types of scenarios. It's similar to the MMIs during interview season. MMI stands for, I'm forgetting, what does MMI stand for? The
multiple mini interviews.
Multiple mini interviews.
I had to do that for VCU.
UVC. So was it similar, you would say, like to the Casper?
It felt like the Casper video exam questions. Just in the fact that it was set up very differently from regular interviews. They basically have like a different interviewer for every question. They just focus on that one question with you. And it's just, you memorize the question, you're in the interview room, and you give your response, just like the Casper exam.
Okay, that's interesting. That's more like it used to be in person, but you had your interviews online. Okay, cool. Yeah, the pandemic changed things for sure. So now a little bit about how the Casper test is structured. So as Nura was mentioning, there is a type response section and also a video response section. So it's both. The reason why they actually introduced a video response section, I was reading a little bit on their news page on the website, because applicants started complaining that it tended to be like a how fast you can type exam, because you're only given 5 seconds to respond to each scenario. You have 3 different scenarios per 3 questions per scenario, which means you're answering a total of 27 to 30 questions total in the type response section. And then so they introduced a video response because, you know, we can talk much faster than we can speak. So in total, this exam is 90 minutes long. And feel free to refer back to this recording for these slides. So that's why I'm not going over all. So now let's switch gears a little bit into the AAMC preview exam that Nura took and Renee and I did not take. It is a little bit familiar. It is a little bit similar to the Casper, what they're checking out. They're checking your pre-professionalism skills, cultural competence. You know, I would say capacity for improvement are very important. You know, the resilience and adaptability, and that's what they're assessing during these different types of scenarios that they're throwing at you. Now, how it's structured, there, as Nura was saying, like there are roughly 30 scenarios, and there are 4 to 8 like actions or multiple choice questions that you respond to each scenario. And so you're like actually rating, right, the effectiveness, or like you have a rating scale, right, a point system when you're scoring. Okay, I see you're nodding your head, and it is a little shorter than the Casper. It is 75 minutes long. So and you're able to take this from your home too, right, Nura? Okay, cool. So yes, you are able to take both tests from the comfort of your home, which is very nice. You know, after I took my MCAT, I was thinking, oh, I have to go somewhere else, like another testing center. It is very anxiety inducing, but thankfully you're able to take this from the comfort of your own home, which is always very nice. All right, Amna, you can go ahead and ask us the rest of the questions.
All right, thank you so much. So as a pre-med myself applying next year, before I helped out with this presentation, I didn't know that SATs were, you know, required and recommended in so many schools. So that's something to keep in mind as you're like researching like which school you want to apply to. So our first question I'd like to ask all of you, how long did you study for the Casper or preview tests?
I can talk for the preview, and then everyone else can start talking about the Casper exam. So for me, I spent, I think, a total of 3 afternoons preparing for it. There's really no way to study for these ethical exams. It's kind of something that you essentially learn throughout time, because it's ethics. Like that's what as you develop into an adult, or you know, and to yourself, you kind of learn these things as you go. The way that I tested is that I used the official resources that by the AAMC for the PV exam, that this really long booklet with a bunch of practice questions. And then I also took every opportunity to speak with any provider that I knew and be like, hey, this is a question, what would you say? Because like, who best to ask them? The people who are already doctors. So
that's a great point, Nura, you bring up. So I did something very similar. I would also ask providers. I had like a couple of practice questions I found online. Also, the Casper test provides you with a set of practice questions, and online there are a bunch of these like consulting websites on the blogs that have a lot of questions that you can practice off of. And since they're ethics questions, there's really no right or wrong type of question to ask you. They don't necessarily have to be just healthcare focused. It can also be like, for example, there is an argument going on at work. What would you, and they put you in the scenario where like you have to imagine that you are their colleague at work. So you could be working at Amazon, let's say, and you have these 2 different colleagues. So it's completely unrelated to medicine itself. They're still going to be assessing you, how you deal with conflict, how you show empathy through understanding both people's perspectives. So I learned all of that through over a course. I spent 3 days studying, and I spent 4 days gathering materials, like just looking up, researching what the exam was about. So a total of 1 week preparation I spent for my Casper. The first 4 days was just gathering materials, looking up in different videos, watching some videos, and like how it's actually like familiarizing yourself with the test I think is the biggest way, the best way to actually prepare. When you know what's happening, you're able to reduce your anxiety and perform a little bit better. So when you take more practice tests, which I did in the 3 days leading up to the exam, I was already familiar with it. And so I just received a question from Mahima, like, can you take the Casper test multiple times or just once? You can only take it once. That's a good question. You can only take it one time and it's valid for the upcoming cycle. So if I wanted to apply this cycle, I cannot use my score from last year. I have to retake it. And you can only take it once per cycle, which is also a bummer, which makes you think, like, should I prepare a month for this? Actually, if we had Canadian people in the audience today and Canadian applicants, they tend to study for months for this exam to improve their typing speed. The reason why is because Canadian medical schools put more emphasis on this test, whereas Casper, while it originated from Canada and all medical schools in Canada require it, the United States puts a little less emphasis on it and use it as a score in your entire holistic application that I've been told. Now, it depends on the medical school, how much emphasis they put on it and how much they value it. So it's a matter of researching your schools. And I would say that if you're applying in the US, it is something that you should not spend more than 2 weeks preparing for. So Raneem, how long did you prepare for the Casper, if you prepared at all?
Yeah, so I prepared for about a week. It was mainly just me familiarizing myself with the test. I looked at the questions Casper provided, and I also did kind of look online a bit to see other questions and other scenarios that other people had. But I think most of like my studying was just like practicing with the format of the test, trying to answer quickly, because I think you get like 30 seconds to prepare and then you have to immediately start answering. So it's just mainly me practicing, typing quickly or being able to come up with answers quickly instead of just me spending a long time thinking about my answer and less time typing or speaking. So yeah, it was just going over the official resources they give you and familiarizing myself with the format.
Perfect.
Yeah, so I like that Nora mentioned that, it's important to have experience. Like over time, building up your experience is what enables you to answer these questions in the best way. Like it's important to spend time with a physician or healthcare provider in the field, getting a sense of their thought process of like how they handle certain situations. So yeah, our next question for all of you is, how did you familiarize yourselves with ethical principles and concepts?
It's a good segue. I would say like I really just went online and just searched Casper practice questions, and just the first 3 results that came up. They talked about the 4 pillars that Dr. Shima went over, like do no harm, maleficence, justice. So these are principles that, since we're taking this exam in the context of applying to medical school, I just use that as a lens to guide me, even if I was in like having questions that weren't related at all to medicine. So using the 4 guiding principles, like the beneficence, non-maleficence, and then there justice, and then the 4th one is escaping me. I can go back and find it actually. Autonomy. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Exactly. That's actually one of the more important ones. Autonomy. So like when I had to answer questions about like an argument a couple had, for example, I would use like autonomy and like respect both people's perspectives. I would have to be like talking to them. I was kind of serving as a middleman. Like, and on YouTube, we have some resources slide coming up. So they also tell you like these different types of ethical principles, how you should be thinking about it, and the mindset that you should use, because these are standardized exams. So remember that, like, they say that there's no one right answer, but there tends to be a structure to these questions where you should give context. You should go through your entire thought process. A good thing about this is that even though it's timed, there's no grammar associated with the Casper, so you don't have to type in proper punctuation. I know I definitely did. I know I had a lot of typos in my answers, but that's okay as long as you're showing that you thought about it. You're you're showing your entire thought process, and that was what I did. And I guess I am deviating from the question, so I'll pass it over to Nuda and Raneem.
I want to add something that you said, just emphasize it. It is true that there's no technically right answer. What these tests are really trying to, especially the Casper test, this is more emphasized in the Casper test, is they're trying to see your thought process. Like what was it that you were considering and thinking about before you made your judgment? That's what they're testing. They're not testing what your actual action was, not as much at least. One of the other ways that I studied for the exam was actually just like some books and also to familiarize myself with ethical principles and concepts. I of course looked at the AMC website for like what they considered important ethical principles, because they have like a whole list of those qualities. So you want to think about that. I would definitely go to that page and look through each one and try to think of some example in your life that can pertain to that you can speak about and like integrate into all of your writing and answering these questions. Another thing I did was like reading books. So ironically enough, GW has required reading over the summer, which is a book that I kind of didn't fully read. I like looked at it and like kept checking it for things. It's called The Illness Narratives by, I forgot his first name, but I know his last name is Kleinman. It's like Suffering, Healing, and the Human Condition. It talks a lot about like what it means, like people are not machines. We have to treat them like, human beings. Like when we get sick, we're not just like trying to treat an illness and, send them off on their way. They're not like cars. We have emotions, we have feelings, we react to things. Like just reading things, like you can read articles. Jam has a lot of articles, although they're behind a paywall, but you don't have to, go to professional journals. Just, yeah, basically that.
So yeah. Go ahead, Renee.
Yeah, so I was just basically going to reiterate, it's just looking online. And if you do look online, you'll find that a lot of articles do discuss medical ethics and just like the principles that you should follow when, dealing with any sort of medical situation. So I would say I familiarized myself with those concepts. And yeah, definitely if you look at the Casper website and the Casper resources, you'll find some. The AAMC website provides some. And I would say another way would be what Nura and Minhal were talking about before, just experience in medicine and experience with physicians. Like as you're going along and as you're shadowing or scribing or whatever it is that you're doing to gain more experience, you'll find yourself learning these principles as you go along. So definitely like referring to your past experiences would help.
Right. So it all ties together.
Yeah, thank you so much. So for our next question, did you feel adequately prepared to address ethical scenarios presented in the exams?
Are we ever prepared for anything?
Good question. Yeah.
I prepared as best as I could. I kind of just had like, as long as you have a solid like foundation within yourself about what your guiding principles and ethics are and values are, you should be fine. You really have to trust yourself and believe in what you're going to say. That's as much as I could say about it. I'd like the fact that I was able to ask a bunch of providers like what they thought and what how they think about things was really helpful. It made me feel a lot better about how prepared I was for the exam. But it really depends on how you approach like your mindset when approaching these things.
So when it comes to mindset, like let's say someone doesn't necessarily think in that framework, and I know I personally didn't. So what I would do is I wouldn't give like sometimes they ask you yes or no questions. They're not looking for you to answer yes. They're looking for you to answer why you would say yes and how you came to the conclusion of yes. So when I changed my mindset to that, okay, so that means they want to hear my thought process and not necessarily the yes. So even when I would run out of time for some questions. I know that there were some questions I did not completely answer the way I was to the point where I was satisfied. I didn't type that fast. And, we are all humans, as Nura said. So really, I felt that I adequately explained my thought process. Maybe it wouldn't answer the question, but I don't think that that's what they're looking for. I think that they're really just looking for your thought process. So the more you're able to talk about your thought process, the more your mind goes into these different ways of thinking. I know that for one part of the Casper exam, I won't say the question, but I'll say that I did talk about, self-awareness. So when this test was asking me about like, how do you, it was something related to how do you perform in different, when you're in different contexts. So let's say I'm in school, I'm wearing my student hat. When I'm at home, I'm wearing my sister and family hat. So, but when I was during the class, I told them, like this exam that I'm taking right now, XYZ. So I showed my self-awareness in that way, like, look, I'm wearing my test taker hat. And I know that there's a human who's going to be grading my response. So when I showed my self-awareness that I know that this is a test, but, similar to this test, this is a social content. This is a social construct. So I think it was related to social construct. So that was like a way I answered one of those questions. I didn't think I would do well because I really just called out the test itself and talked about like social constructs and gave an example using Casper. It's kind of like a matrix thing where you're talking about the thing that you're in. So, Reneem, do you feel that you adequately prepared? Because like Noura said, like, how do you ever feel truly prepared, right?
Yeah, I don't think I've ever walked into anything feeling prepared, to be honest. I think it's just you do the work and then you go in and you kind of hope for the best, if you will. But I think it's fine if you walk into a test and you feel like a little bit nervous, or you feel like, oh, I'm not 100% sure if I'm 100% ready for this, but I don't think you're ever 100% ready for anything. And so as long as you just go over the resources you have provided and you do work and you feel like, oh, I think I did at least study what I wanted to study. I did look over what I wanted to look over. Then I think it's a bit all right if you don't feel like you're adequately prepared, because that could just be, nerves. It could just be just like you worrying about something. So I personally didn't feel adequately prepared. I don't think I walked into the MCAT feeling prepared. I don't remember walking into anything feeling like, oh, I'm 100% going to ace this. But I just thought, oh, I did what I wanted to do. I studied what I wanted to study. I looked over what I wanted to look over. And so I'm just going to go in, hope for the best kind of thing.
Right. So yeah, like Renee was saying earlier, part of the preparation for these exams begins during your pre-medical journey. So like engaging in those meaningful conversations and like shadowing with providers is a real building block that'll reflect and will come with you on your exam. So now I'm going to ask you all more specifics about your preparation. And I think there's a couple of links that you'll be able to share with us. So yeah, what resources and strategies proved most helpful for you to prepare for these exams?
So these are the ones that I linked. So these are I like bookmarked the exact resources I use. I didn't unbookmark them, so I was able to find. So I just used these 4 resources. The most helpful one was the night before it, like, so basically I think my test was around 10 a.m. the next day or something like that, or in the afternoon. I took this test at 9 p.m. the night before, the official test. So when you, and I think there's only one that Casper offers that's also timed, and you go through the entire like basically it's a completely accurate simulation. So I treated it like it was my actual test, even though I didn't look very good, but I did record the responses and everything, even though no one was scoring it. I think that was that really helped me with my nerves. It helped me feel more prepared for at least like the structure, like how it would look, like what I would need to click on and press, and be used to like just typing like that. And just doing it one time was more than enough, I would say. And that I would say that really solidified my foundation for the Casper. Really understanding the Casper, understanding the exam itself is half, I would say, half the battle to score well. Understanding what is going to be scored is also going to really help you, knowing that like grammar and spelling is not going to be an issue. With something that I found out from, I think, a different YouTube video was by like a medical student in Canada, but he said that you're not being judged on your typos, you're not being judged on punctuation or spelling. So I was typing the way I text my sisters, my friends, like totally, like maybe as long as the person understands. So I limited my use of acronyms, but I did ensure that I was like, that was because of a resource that's why I didn't care about my typos. So it's important to just take a visual practice test, know how you feel, just gauge how like your anxiety levels during the exam. And I just use these are 2 different types of Q&A scenarios. Like when you guys were asking about like how do you prepare for ethical scenarios? These are the 2 YouTube videos I used. And in case you're not able to click on the links, you can just search these 2. Shrimasian Consulting is a medical school college application consulting thing where they put a lot of YouTube videos online. Same with BMO. So yeah, they give you really good answers. I would say like my one critique of these is that they tend to be more in the healthcare sphere. Like they're making you think like a doctor, and they're asking you questions that only like doctors can answer. Like sometimes there's questions about euthanasia, sometimes there's questions about like abortion, but these are not things that you will be asked about on the Casper. Or were you asked about these things like in a clinical context, Noura, in the preview?
I don't think I had any questions that had any like, definitely no political charged questions. And no heavy healthcare questions. They were all like ethical based scenarios. Some of them were sort of healthcare related, but none of them were like as heavy leaning as these resources were. Also, I want to say one thing about them. Don't be like intimidated by their sample responses because they write way more than you possibly could.
They totally, like, first of all, they prepared a video. So they totally like went over and over and over again. Whereas you only have a minute to prepare your video and like 10 seconds to prepare the videos and then 1 minute to just think and then read the questions and then start answering. So don't be intimidated. That's a very good point. I was very intimidated, like how long and how complex their responses were. But that's because they're beautifully prepared. They had unlimited time to prepare. So if you look at the comments of these YouTube videos, sometimes they're like, hey, like I could never type that much. I could never say that much. And it was just 1 minute preparation. So keep that in mind as a grain of salt. So remember that you're being scored not against these types of people. You're being scored against other students like you who only have a minute to prepare.
Yeah, and the way I use these resources is I primarily use like the actual resources by the test providers, so like AMC and Casper. They had their own question bank practice questions, and both of them also had a full practice test. And I used the practice test like Maha did the day before, and I took it as if it was like a legit test. For the questions that I would get from resources like I don't know how to say it. I was just say Shmesme because I don't know how to say it. I would take all of the questions, have them all recorded on my own doc, and then basically go ask providers. Be like, so this is the question, and I would compare it to what I thought the answer would be.
That's really good. I did something very similar. I asked a couple of questions like, so what would you think? And so, what's interesting is that they explain their thought process without me asking them to explain their thought process. So it shows you that how a doctor thinks after being experienced for so many years. They first give you the pros and cons of both options. They talk about why like each option would be good in a specific type of context. And then ultimately, if they had time, like they would say like what they would pick personally, but that they would respect the patient's autonomy because like Dr. Shima said, the patient is in charge of their body. They're the boss of their own body. So ultimately we had to listen to the patient. And that's again, revisiting the ethic of autonomy, which I learned a little bit more with this UW medicine website. So this helps you think like a doctor, but these tests are helping you think more along the lines of someone who's very ethical. So, and that tends to go hand in hand with a student who's preparing for a career in medicine and healthcare.
Right. So I sent the link to the sample case scenarios in the chat. Also, quick follow-up. You mentioned that like typos don't really matter in the typed responses, but how would you describe like how to maintain like your composure during the video essay questions? Because I feel like maintaining your composure and like acting confident is the best way to go about those. So can you touch on that?
Yes, you're right. You're right. I would say fake it till you make it. Like if you're answering and let's say I lost my train of thought in one answer. As you can tell, I can lose my train of thought very easily as I'm responding to these questions at this panel. So I was responding very similarly, but I was responding confidently and I reduced my ums and I used more hand movements. That was one way I maintained my composure. Another way was like I drank a lot of water before so that I wouldn't look super flushed. I looked like I knew what I was talking about, even though I didn't. And ultimately, like you only get one try. So I was just like, you know what, I totally blacked out when I was doing it, but really when I it was sort of like it felt like a performance kind of because I know that I'm being scored, but I just didn't let that hinder my ability to just talk like as if I was talking at this talk where this chill, there's no one scoring me. I just talked like a human, and so I know that if a human is scoring me, they will be able to connect with me and empathize with me, and they know, of course, that you're being timed. They know that you only have a minute to prepare. So keeping that in mind and maintaining your composure is very important. So I know that when I took my practice test, I took it the same place that I was going to take it when I actually was going to take it in my home. So that's another way a really good way to rehearse and practice. Act like it's your actual exam, like Nora did.
Right. Okay. You want to say something? Okay. Next question for you about the Casper. Do you need to be able to type fast to perform well on it?
It really does feel that way.
It does feel that way. So, I would say, so basically typing speed is called WPM or words per minute. So when we talk at 200-ish words per minute. When we type, the average human typing speed is actually 40 words per minute. I would say the Casper does require you to type more than 40 words per minute. You should be able to type at least 50 to 60 to be able to at least coherently say all your thoughts and within the time limit. So, and so if you don't naturally type fast, that's okay. Just spend 1 week I know before I started typing fast, and I am a fast typer. So Noor and Reem and I, we did have this debate where we were thinking maybe I perform very well because I type fast. So my typing speed is between 100 to 120, which is like 4 times faster than average. But when I started out, I was very slow too. So I spent just a week practicing on monkey type a long time ago, just because I used to type race as a hobby. So there's these websites called monkeytype.com, typeracer.com, where you can actually practice your typing speed. Let me check the chat if there is anything. Yeah, so I'm gonna link to monkeytype.com, which is a really great way to gauge how fast you type. So do that after the session, and it will be interesting to see. And so WPM stands for words per minute. And so monkey type I really like because it doesn't judge you on your accuracy of words, as long as you're in the realm of typing a word. That's good. That's a really good way to practice for Casper, I would say, in case that you feel that you type a little slow. But you don't need to type crazy fast like I do. Noura, do you know what your WPM is, or words per minute speed?
I'm 70 on a good day. I am not a fast typer.
This makes me think like being pre-med, and they encourage you to scribe, right, for doctors. So it kind of teaches us to type fast naturally. And I feel like if you've shadowed doctors where you can see how much documentation you have to do, and a lot of typing is involved, a lot of administrative work behind the scenes and clinical documentation, that requires a lot of typing. So I would say, like, if you haven't practiced now, you should end up practicing eventually. Maybe Casper could be your sign to practice, and just be a little faster than 50, I would say. I think between 60 to 70 is a really good typing speed. How about you, Reem? Do you think that you need to type fast to perform well in the Casper?
Yeah, a bit. My personal typing speed is 70 words per minute. I didn't feel as rushed. So I mean, there were some times where I felt like I was running out of time, but I still was able to write most of what I wanted. So yeah, I do think, I mean, you don't have to be super fast or anything, but you do have to be like being able to type a bit quickly. So you shouldn't be looking for the keys on the keyboard. You should know where everything is and just be able to type, yeah, like 60, 70 words per minute, I would say.
That's true.
One thing
yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I'm sorry, I cut out.
No, go ahead. You're good.
Okay, sorry. One thing I want to emphasize though is that when you're typing, don't worry about like trying to say as much as you can. Make sure you're getting to the point and explaining your thought above all. Like, I wouldn't think too much about the time. If once that timer starts, just start typing. Don't even look at the clock anymore. Get all your ideas down. Write down what you're as you're thinking it. Write it down.
Exactly. There's no time to pause. I was gonna say the same thing, Noura. Like, there's no time for you to pause and not type. You have to type immediately, like when your timer starts. They give you a minute to prepare. In fact, I think that you can start typing even during the preparation time because they have the questions open. So technically you have an extra minute if you're able to just type immediately, and that could help a lot if you start typing in a 6-minute time frame instead of the 5 minutes. So, it's up to you how you prepare. It's up to you, and you know yourself best. So this is a question that pops up, like, oh, you're just gonna type fast to score well. And maybe it's true in some scenarios, but that's why they introduced a video response section where you're actually talking, and that's, like I said, 200 words per minute.
Right, so that's a great transition to our next question. So how did you approach time management while answering these ethical questions, and like how were you able to hit all those points that were like lingering in your thought process?
Go ahead, Reem. I'll say here.
I was gonna say, we were talking before about taking the official test. I would say that really helped because it put me in like the actual scenario, and I was able to practice where I wanted to take the test and with timers and all that. And that really helped me be able to determine, was I typing too slowly? Was I speaking too slowly? Was I maybe taking too long to think? So definitely taking a practice test before the actual test will help with this, because it tells you, where your weaknesses are, what you need to improve on, as well as, of course, if you think you do type too slowly, going on monkey test and, trying it out or practicing a bit. Also, looking online for, like we said before, looking for practice questions or scenarios that other people did and practicing them on your own time, or even having someone else try to look for questions online and ask them to you, so you don't have any time to prepare for them because, this is your first time seeing them. All of these things help because you're being forced to answer on a timer, you're being forced to answer immediately. So yeah, just definitely a lot of practice helps with this.
I would say, yeah. As for time management, it definitely the official test helped me with time management because something I struggled with was getting to the point. Maybe as you guys are wouldn't be surprised by that, but getting to the point was also very important while also balancing your thought process. It's a skill, right? It's a skill, as Dr. Chima said. It's a skill that comes with practice. Top scorers do not score top like immediately. It still takes a little bit of practice, just a little bit of time. Like I said, like if you spend just a week preparing every day doing a couple of these talking. I know I would talk to the mirror, or I would talk to my younger sisters. I would just explain my thought process. I would ask them to quiz me, test me. So as a trusted person, or just talk in front of your camera. That's what a lot of YouTubers do. And so they just talk to their camera. Like if you just open up Zoom, talk to yourself, because you'll be looking at yourself while you're taking the test as well. So that's a good way that and then you can time yourself too, because on Zoom, it gives you the time option, like how long you've been talking. So I would say that's one way I approach time management. Again, time management is a skill across all different types of tests that you'll take, whether it's the MCAT, whether it's all your tests during college. So ethical questions aren't so different in that regard.
I second everything everyone said.
Or you third everything.
Third.
Okay, so our next question. Did you find it challenging to balance competing ethical principles or considerations while responding to scenarios in the exams? Because I know that with Dr. Chima's case studies, there were multiple options, and you have to evaluate, with the AAMC preview, you actually have to evaluate each possible response to the options. So how did you navigate those situations?
This was definitely an issue I had, and I remember answering a lot of questions with, if the circumstances were like this, I would do this, but if it was instead like this, then I would do that, which actually made it a bit difficult for me to answer within the time frame because I was essentially giving two different answers. But I would say we talked about this before, but a lot of preparation, a lot of research into ethical principles and things like that, and conflicting scenarios would help with this, because it really puts you into the mindset of just answering immediately, or not weighing them, but really just determining what is the most important ethical principle to consider in the current scenario. But I did definitely find it a bit challenging, because sometimes you just do find things conflicting, and you do have to find yourself kind of weighing the principles that and determining which would be the best act on the current scenario.
Sometimes there'd be scenarios where a colleague at work tells you about something that happened to something that could affect their wife. And they're like, no, I don't want to tell my wife. And you also are not going to tell my wife. So they put you in a scenario will you tell their wife or not? Because they're both your friends. So that's a very interesting case. If I pose it to you guys, if ultimately, now I'm using my ethical moral lens of integrity and honesty. If I know both of them personally, I would first advise the guy, you should tell your wife because of XYZ reason. And it would help if your marriage, for example, or it would help in this case, it would help your children in this way. So also being able to counsel the person to just make the right decision themselves is also an interesting case, because at the end of every Casper question, they ask, what would you do? What do you think? So when they prime it that way, you're already role playing with them. So just go with it. Like Amna said, your composure, just pretend that you really are in that scenario. Pretend it's not a scenario anymore. Pretend you're performing, pretend it's a real role play, a real life scenario, because they are all very real life applicable. Sometimes they ask you, okay, so tell me about a time you had an issue like this in a group setting. So you have to also be prepared with I had to come prepared with a couple of a time where I disagreed with someone. These are common interview questions that you're asked during med school applications. Okay, so tell me about a time you had a difficult time working in a group, or tell me about a time you did well in a group, or tell me about a time you exemplified leadership. So these are all different ways that just coming in with a couple of real life examples yourself, deriving from your life experiences, is also something that you can use on the Casper as well.
You just remind me that there were those questions. This was probably the one thing I spent the most time preparing for, is just trying to make sure that I had experiences that I could quickly begin explaining, and practicing how I would briefly introduce it. Because I know a lot of us, when we tell stories, it takes a minute for our brain to recall them, and then we take a lot of time just to explain them. So definitely having those ready and in your mind. In terms of balancing competing principles, I basically did something similar to what Neem described, where it's I had to basically create additional scenario, what's the word I'm looking for? Additional context to the scenario that would guide my decision. So I basically just like, depending on like X, Y, and Z, I would either lean this way or that way to respond to the scenario situation.
Exactly. In fact, I would also make up extra context. While I'm going along, like you're saying, like I would say, like, okay, but if the husband, if we're running along with the husband case, like, oh, but if the husband, if this information would endanger the wife legally, then I would probably not tell, that would be compromising my value of integrity and honesty, right? But in this case, honesty would be, in my opinion, the best route to go because we're keeping people safe, right? But if it's not, if you could solve an actual problem between a marriage in a couple of people you're friends with, then you should, either have a group conversation, resolve it amicably, talk to both sides, just be a mediator, and ultimately let them make the decision. But you're just sharing your opinion, you're adding extra context, even though they didn't give me this extra information, I'm just making it up. And then they'd ask you like, so tell me about a time that you've also disagreed with someone, which is also very random. So come in with these examples, come in with these concrete examples that would answer a time. Like if I go back to, I just want to go like here, give an example of a time where you showed capacity for improvement. Like just, of course, this is the preview, but this is what I use to kind of prepare my Casper scenarios that I'll derive from my personal experiences. So I'm like, okay, so let me prepare a story for my social skills. Let me prepare a story for a time I showed culture competence. Let me show a time I showed team. So very brief, like just being able to just even have these stories, like have 5 or 6 stories in your head will really help you a lot as you're going along and taking the test, because that way you have to think about it less, you're maximizing your time. Okay, I think this is the last question.
Okay, so I'll ask it for you guys. How have your experiences with the Casper and preview exams influenced your perspectives on the importance of ethics in medical education?
This is a good one. We'll have to think about this one a little bit.
They definitely emphasize its importance for me because like we talk a lot about ethics, and as you're going through like your pre-med journey or like your undergraduate degree, you'll find that you often hear the mention of ethics, especially if you take like philosophy classes or things like that. But it really hones the importance of it when you're applying to med school and you find, oh, they actually give you tests about ethics, because this is obviously something that's really important to consider. And you also notice the importance of it, like we were saying before, as you're going through like scribing or shadowing, or as you're doing any sort of clinical experience, because you'll find yourself having to experience these scenarios, or watching a physician have to like use ethics in making decisions or in certain scenarios and having to weigh ethical principles. So definitely finding that there are actual tests and that they do take into consideration your scores to these tests and like their evaluation of your ethics definitely just emphasizes importance and just tells you that they really do hold ethics to a high standard, and that they do actually use it as a metric to determine whether or not they find you a good fit for their school or a good fit for medicine in general.
Yeah, and something I really do like about these ethic exams is that we've all, like in school, or even like from our youth, because people used to find them really fun to play around with, but we've been asked ethical dilemma questions like the trolley question, or the husband whose wife is sick and needs to steal medication. But what I really like about how they do is that, one, it's not as, some might say, oh, it's simple, cut and dry, like save the many over the few, or save a life, like ask for forgiveness before permission, before permission. These really put you like, okay, now it's not a scenario anymore. This is real life. And you're going to have to face these in real life going forward. So put yourself in the mindset now. What would you actually do?
Exactly. And I like how Noura said, what do we actually do? Because that's literally how Castor video responses are. Like you have a video and then they ask you like, what would you actually do? Like, what do you recommend? Or you're in a group doing a project. What would you do? Like, what do you think? Do you think Kyla is wrong? Do you think Kyla is right? What do you think? So yeah, sometimes you have heated people. You have to manage their emotions, and that happens to healthcare. And that translates directly to healthcare too, because you'll have to manage difficult patients. You will have people who are not always happy with your medical decisions. You'll have people who disagree with you. You'll have to be able to manage that. have to be able to have teamwork, because it's not just a doctor. There's a whole a multidisciplinary healthcare team. There's PT, physical therapists, there's caseworkers, there's social workers, there's nurse practitioners, there's nurses, there are medical assistants, there are medical scribes. So you have to be able to manage the entire landscape of healthcare. You're not just in a bubble. You're not just constrained to your own box. You have to be able to really practice your ethical and moral values and establish that compass now. And that's why I really enjoyed being able to take these tests, even though the school I'm going to didn't require it. It was still a great opportunity. I liked it. So I recommend, even if one school requires it, don't just rule out the school because of it. It might even tell you a little bit more about the school, that, how they value ethics. They are still able to assess ethics through your letters of recommendation. Those competencies I was showing you, I would be sending those competencies to my letter of recommendation writers, and I'll tell them, can you please highlight one or two from this list if you feel that I exemplified it. So just, know that this is not the end all be all exam. It's not the way it is in Canada. In Canada, it tends to be the end all be all, but in the US, it's not. Canada has way less medical schools than the US does. So, in case you don't even do well, you can still get into medical school. That's the main point I'm trying to say here. So because there are other ways to measure ethics. That's why that's why medical schools have interviews. That's why medical schools have letters of recommendation. That's why they vet you. They check your resilience and adaptability through your GPA too. So there are a lot of different competencies that they can assess your ethics in as well.
Okay, thank you so much. That is our last question for all of you. I really learned a lot in today's session. I'm sure everyone else watching here did as well. So everyone can give a thanks in the chat box for all of our students taking the time out of their days to mentor us, their busy schedules before life in med school.
Thank you.
Okay, so now I'll be doing our closing session with our quiz and future session dates. The link to the quiz is now live, and you'll need a 70% or higher to pass and receive certification. That link is in the chat now. And our next session dates, these dates will also be posted on our social media outlets. And our next session is next Friday, June 23rd at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time for our fourth part of the Dusima series by Dr. Callahan. So thank you so much, everyone, for attending today's session, and we hope to see you in upcoming sessions as well. And this concludes this week's shadowing.